Guru Nation, welcome back to another episode. We are in our home away from home. This has been our business headquarters over the last several years since COVID, where Chris and I meet to discuss business. We've been getting a lot of questions from the community about people wanting to start sites. They want to start CROs. And Chris and I are always we used to think the same way. Oh man, because we're used to getting studies from IQVIA, we're used to getting studies from PPD, the big CROs, CNEOs. So it makes sense. It's logical to think, okay, rather than being a site, let's try to be the CRO because you're one step closer to the money, which is the sponsor.
You would expect to make more money.
You would expect to make a lot more, but what we were naive, and we're trying to save you guys that same mistake. Not to say you can't make a successful CRO, and if that's something you really want to do, you should. But we always tell people start with a site first.
Absolutely.
And try. If you really want to go the CRO route, what's going to be valuable is getting it to phase 1 somehow as a site. Because sponsors that need phase 1 sites, they're also typically in the market for CRO and vice versa. Mm-hmm. Sponsors that are looking to do a phase 1, looking for CROs with access to sites, or maybe they find the site first, it gives you a double chance to be successful.
Sure.
But to just from the get-go say, hey, I want to start a CRO, the margins are not there. The reason IQVIA makes money and CNEOs and all is all the technology platform they have. All the stuff they do on the back end, data management, biostats, all the stuff that when you and I do RFPs for our minuscule CRO, we have to outsource.
Yeah.
So we're not seeing any of that. IQVIA and them, they just buy these companies up and say, okay, we can do it all.
So it's amazing how many calls a year. It's not significant, but we take a number of calls each year in which this is somebody new to research, oftentimes a medical doctor, and they have no prior research experience and they want to start a CRO.
Yeah.
It just baffles me. You have little to no understanding about research, and you're going to jump right in and handle nearly every aspect of research.
There's a lot to unpack there.
So Dan and I often, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dan and I often suggest, as Dan had stated, you're better off starting a site, get an understanding of the industry, have a better understanding of what you're getting yourself into prior to trying to do something that you have no understanding about.
Yeah. It just makes sense. But see, a lot of these people, and feel free to eat, man. By the way, this is a very romantic setup we got. We want to let you guys, there's nothing wrong with this, but Chris and I are both happily married with other people, I might add. So don't let this, I know it looks a little strange, but, this is legit where we meet for business and stuff.
There you go, that's yours.
Oh, thank you. I told my wife I'm not going to eat, but here we go.
An appetizer doesn't count.
She does not watch, so here's the logic. What's the word for it? What appears to be logical on the surface, but when you dig down is not. The people reaching out to us to want to start CROs usually are CRAs because they work for CROs.
Sure.
But they think all they see is the monitoring. And remember when we had this RFP, or we almost had an RFP for a project that we would have made very little on, I texted you during the Zoom call, I said, the monitoring is the commodity. They didn't even ask us who the monitoring, how that's going to be handled. They just assumed you're going to take care of that. Yeah. They didn't ask for our CV.
That's right.
They didn't ask for any of that stuff. So they're not interested in that. But the people reaching out to us, they think, oh, I've been a monitor for 15 years. That's going to help me get studies.
Yeah.
As a CRO.
Good point.
As a CRO.
That's yours too.
You're giving me more than you're eating.
No, I got the same amount.
You got to eat all these veggies. Chris, you got to do what's good for your health.
What the hell is that?
That looks like
Is that an artichoke?
Yeah, artichoke.
Or a piece of wood?
No, it's artichoke. So what do you think about, usually it's CRAs that want to do this. And we always say, go start a site first. And when you start a site, the easiest type of study to get is phase 2, 3, and 4. But ultimately, we don't want to crush your dreams. If you want to start the CRO, I would start the phase 1 site first. which is hard enough to do, but at least it's closer to something practical than something way out of left field of the CRO. Because the CRO is, when we unpack that, man, it's so much stuff. So much stuff.
So my concern would be, let's take the example of the CRA. You're stepping out of your comfort zone, being a CRA, right? You're an employee of an employer. If you start a CRO, I think your expenses will be much more than you've considered initially, right? Because if you take on a fairly large project, if you take on a phase 2 or phase 3 study, you're going to have to hire other CRAs. You cannot take care of it most likely
as a CRA,
all on your own, right? You're going to need probably at least 4 or 5 CRAs, and you're going to have to pay for those CRAs, right? You're also going to need a project manager. You're also going to need people to gather vendors, right? You can do that yourself.
There's even stuff we were asked to do we never heard of being in the industry 15 years.
Right.
Data Safety Management Committee.
Right.
We just assume sponsors take care of that. Well, guess what? The sponsors that need that service don't have that.
Exactly.
And that's why they want you. So they want you for everything. The monitoring is an afterthought. It's a commodity.
So when you start a CRO, there's going to be a lot more man hours, I think, than most people consider. So you got to pay those salaries, right? Or you're going to have a number of partners.
Which at the end of the day is the same thing.
Yeah. Well, if you have partners, you don't have to pay for them, right?
Right.
There's
no
a
risk.
percentage of the
There's
company.
no risk.
Right. There's little to no risk. It's just time you're investing. But if you don't have these partners, you're going to have to invest a lot of money. Now, take the flip side of that and start a site. Well, you need a PI. If you're a CRA, you can be the coordinator. There's no money invested there if you're working at the PI site. So I think for most, it's going to make a lot more sense to start a site and then expand from there for most. Now, to be fair, and Dan and I may disagree on this, our experience is limited to smaller sponsors in terms of budgets. But
that's the ones you're going to get if you're a CRO, if you're a new CRO.
That's exactly what I was going to follow it up with. So, if you get a huge project with 100 sites, and you're never going to get that as your first study as a CRO. But if you get that, there might be a lot of money there. We don't know. We have little experience with this. We just don't know. But that's not what you're going to get, as Dan pointed out. You're just not. Right? You have no experience. Who in their right mind is going to hand you a multi-million-dollar project and you have little to no experience as far as at a CRO level. So that's just not what you're going to get. You're going to get smaller projects, and
we got investigator initiated.
Right. You're going to get smaller projects, and they don't pay that well. They don't pay.
Right.
You're not going to make a lot of money. You'll probably make more money remaining as CRA.
Yes, but if you want to go entrepreneur route, it's much more practical, easier, profitable. What other positive things can we throw in there to start a site than to start a CRO?
So I think to start a site, at least initially, you'll dedicate less time. Because you'll have a site, and it won't take a lot of your time each week to work on business development. There'll be no real time investment until you have a study and you start enrolling patients. Opposite that, you have a CRO. Yes, until you have a project, there won't be really any time invested. But before you see any money, you're going to have to invest a lot of time, to the point where you may need to quit your job if you're the only person working on that project. Because, again, you have to gather these vendors, right? You have to get bids, and it's going to take all your time. You can't be a CRA and be doing that too. At least, I don't think.
But you got to admit, it sounds so attractive.
Sure.
To say, even for us, we were like, we couldn't wait when we got our first RFP. This was in 2015. Remember?
Yeah.
That's when you texted me. We were all excited doing our RFP. And that's when you texted me after because you're the budget guy. You got into the budget and you're like, I don't know if we're just getting underpaid or, but there's no money in CRO.
Yep.
And it turned out the more RFPs we did, that was the norm. That was not an outlier.
Yep. Again, just I want to preface that with these are smaller sponsors. So it could be different with the bigger sponsors. I doubt it, but it could be.
But you're never going to get the opportunity.
Not initially, that's for sure.
You think Pfizer's going to work with DSCS?
No.
Or they could work with IQVIA?
Sure.
And if they're not happy with IQVIA, they go to Syneos. They go down the line because it's at that level, it's who you know.
Not disagreeing with you.
It's who you know. Those guys at IQVIA and Syneos, they do biz dev. They go to conferences. They get those guys drunk, from at all those conferences. They have parties. They're like, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
You're gonna,
You've been to those parties.
Yeah, that's how they do it. It's at that level. It's more about who you know than what you know, because they already. What you know, they expect everybody knows the same.
Sure.
So now it's more like, how can you help me? In the future, I can help you out.
Yep.
I owe you one. Pat your back, that kind of stuff. You're not going to get that now as a site. It doesn't work that way. There are sites that get studies that never go to conferences. They just do a good job of enrolling.
Yep.
Number one, the data is the second. The quality of the data. I mean, it has to be adequate.
And you're skipping over how much easier it is to get started as a site.
Why?
I mean, it's
Before we
times
run out of this battery,
it's
why?
Because sponsors...
Because there's somebody watching, they've watched this entire 11 minutes, and they're like, screw these guys, I'm still want to do CRO.
So, as a site, sponsors take on, I wouldn't say regularly new research-naive sites, but they do that much more often than they would take on a research-naive CRO, or a new CRO. Let's not say research-naive, but a new CRO.
That's right.
They're much more willing to work with a site that's new, opposed to a CRO that's new. And on top of that, any project you do get as that CRO, as Dan and I have said a number of times here, you're not going to get a great first project. Whereas a site, you can get a great first study.
You can.
One of our clients, he was MD in Colorado. His first study, he said he'll make easily $2 million. Easily, as a site.
What study is this? Let's get it. Let's get it for a Yuma clinic.
I don't even remember. This was back in November, December.
Oh, okay.
I don't even remember the study. But
you can make 7 figures. Like, remember that video we did? This was before inflation. 12 months to 7 figures.
Yeah.
I think that's way more attainable in 2022. A lot of it's due to inflation, but the market itself,
So to be fair, I would say that's an outlier to make 7 figures in your first year.
But it's still more likely to happen in 2022 than 2015.
I would say, however, you're much more likely to make good money as a site than you are as a CRO in your first year. Much more likely.
And we didn't even get into this. The stress of the CRO compared to the stress of a site.
Oh yeah. Both can have stresses. Depends on how it's set up, but you're guaranteed to have stress as a CRO, whereas it's not guaranteed as a site.
And the reason I think is because you can control more of the variables at the site.
Sure. Absolutely. You can control how many patients you're going to see, right? Screen, randomized.
If you get a tough study, like I kind of have right now, you can say, you know what? We're just going to wait for another study. You just do an adequate job at this one.
Okay.
So we're going to wait for a easier study to come around.
Yep.
We're going to focus on that. If you're a CRO, you're committed. Like, you are actually committed because you don't necessarily control the site. So if the site's enrolling, you have to go monitor that.
That's right. You're not going to call up the site and say, hey, slow down on enrollment.
Yeah. I
mean, you could. Sponsor finds out, though, they're going to replace you right quick.
It's not the way to go. So what else? Anything else you missed? We left out? And you got to eat your veggies, man. Because I'm going to send this to everybody that asks us, I want to start a CRO.
It's just hard to get that first project. Now, that being said, we do have a client. I was telling this to Dan prior to recording this video.
Before that, the margins. Did we talk about the margins?
No, but, we're not hugely familiar with what the margins are.
Familiar enough.
Sure, you got Quintiles as an example, or IQVIA as an example.
As a site, especially when you're a newer site where you don't have that much overhead, you can make 80% profit margin.
I would say as a new site, that's a little high because you're going to take on studies slowly. You're going to screen probably slowly. I'd say your margins initially as a site is probably around 50%, maybe 60%.
Okay, as a new CRO from the RFPs we saw,
Yeah.
like a half dozen, it's like 10%.
Well, Akivia, who you're aware of from the reports last week, I think,
We love them.
22%.
There you go.
22%.
And that they could actually have it higher, but they're reinvesting a lot into tech platforms.
Sure. They
That's where the industry
it
is
might be
at.
30-40%.
And you're crazy if you think that you're going to compete with Syneos, IQVIA, or PPD in a decentralized clinical trial world.
Yeah.
They're reinvesting 50% of their margins back into technology platforms, which you as a startup CRO have nothing. You have to outsource all that stuff.
Yeah.
They buy that stuff. Okay, let's end it with your happy story of the client.
So this new client, not research naive, but as far as I know, has never worked as a CRO. Somehow he got a project as a CRO. He emailed me today about this. He emailed me the budget they were offering him, and had all kinds of questions, of which, because of the complexity of the study, as well as it's located in another country, I really couldn't provide much guidance. I did a little, as much as I could. But the budget was nothing. I mean, literally the budget was like 200,000. Just round up.
So as a new CRO, if you do get a new project, it's going to be something like this.
Right. And as a site, if you take on a phase 2 or phase 3 study, you can easily earn that, if not more, in one study. And it's much easier.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion. Right? As a site, your study budget, if you enroll, say, 10 patients, you're typically going to make about $300,000. That's how much you're going to generate revenue-wise. I shouldn't say made.
Gross.
Right. Whereas this guy, his budget was $200,000. And that's not profit. That's just what they're paying him to accommodate all aspects of the study and paying the site. So, yeah, I don't know, man. But again, if you have inclinations in getting into research as an entrepreneur in some capacity, the site is the way to go for 99%, we'll just say 99% of individuals.
I'll just say 100.
99.
Yeah, you literally have to be given the project on a platter for me to be comfortable saying take it as a CRO. That's perfect timing. The video's gonna end. The battery's gonna end. Thank you, Chris. Continue eating your veggies. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And we'll catch you all later. Consider site before CRO. You can do both, but do site first. Bye-bye.